Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Tuesday night in the Spotlight. Tonight, I have joining me Jennifer Febel of Live Life Unbroken. And Jennifer is a personal and sorry, you are not broken is Jennifer's personal and professional mantra, and one that she intends to spread to as many people as possible. As a mentor, coach, author, and speaker, Jennifer offers alternative care for anyone suffering from feelings of depression, anxiety, or panic who isn't finding the healing they want through traditional mental health services and are sick of the CBT, medicational, talk therapy, merry-go-round. In her classes and retreats, Jen specializes in bringing a mixture of humor, honesty, and personal truths to help inspire a new perspective on health, growth, and change. And she loves to combine her love of all things nerdy and sciency with a little infusion of woo-woo spirituality. So who is Jen? She is someone who has walked the path of brokenness and lived to tell the story. She is someone who has experienced a dark night of the soul and lived there for over 13 years. She is someone who has been told over and over again that she was broken. And yet here she is, stronger than before, unbroken. Jennifer candidly shares her story in the hopes of inspiring others to know that no one is broken, everyone can heal. Everyone can connect with her at www.livelifeunbroken.com, and I'll share that link in the comments as well. So welcome, Jennifer, and thank you so much for joining me here tonight.
Thank you so
So
much for
can you
having
tell
me.
me, yeah. So can you tell me a little bit about, I know you were talking about this dark night of the soul for 13 years. So how did you transcend from that into where you are now?
So it really all started when I was 19, and that is when I received my official diagnosis, which was seven different mental health diagnoses, including anorexia, bulimia, major depression disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, suicidal ideation, and self harm. In other words, broken.
Yeah.
So every doctor I saw, every specialist, all agreed I was broken, and I believed them because they had a lot of really fancy degrees on the wall and really impressive letters after their name. And when those people tell you that you're broken, it's only a matter of time before you start to believe it. And that became my story. That became that thing that I told myself about myself to myself, and I lived in that place for 13 years. And I have a degree in psychology, so I studied psychology and I went to my therapy and I did the merry-go-round of medication, and we kind of got me to a place of functional dysfunction.
Yeah.
And they told me that that was kind of the best I could hope for. And again, I believed that, and I was just sort of coasting along. And then my anxiety started to manifest as a severe phobia of bugs and insects, which doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but Ontario, where I live, is a really buggy province. And so it got to the point where I literally wouldn't leave the house. It started to kind of go into more of the agoraphobia. So now, in addition to all this other stuff going on, I wouldn't really leave the house. Or if anything flew near me, I literally would run into traffic to avoid nothing. And while I understood that, okay, the depression and anxiety, well, that's just quote unquote runs in my family, and the eating disorder, can't really ever recover from that. But phobias, they're supposed to be able to be healed through. So I started to look into, well, how can I fix this? Because it was really invasive. And when it comes to phobias, there's really only two options. There's desensitization therapy, which means at some point someone's going to put me in a room with a bug. And I'm like, nope.
Don't blame you for that.
Who on earth would pay money for that? Like, that's insane. Even logically knowing that by the time I got there, I'd probably be fine. I'm like, I'm not doing that. And then there was hypnosis, which I thought was bunk. I thought it was pure entertainment value, but nonsense. Wasn't in my wheelhouse at all, but I was desperate.
Yeah.
I was desperate and I couldn't leave the house. And so I reached out to my chiropractor at the time. And I'm like, strange question. Do you happen to know someone who does hypnosis? Because I didn't want to just yellow pages some weirdo who's going to scramble my brain, right? She goes, actually, I do know someone. And she introduced me to the woman who became my coach. And in one session, she nailed on the head what 13 years of therapy and a degree in psychology never came close to. And she is the first person who looked at me and said, "You're not broken. I can help you." And I didn't believe her, but I didn't really have any other option because I wasn't going to pay to be in a room with a bug. And
Yeah.
I trusted my chiropractor. So I'm like, fine, let's see what happens. And I was shocked when 3 months later, not only was the phobia gone, but the anxiety, the depression was gone, and I was able to start to wean off my medications, and I entered recovery. And I actually, December 18th, celebrated my 10-year recovery anniversary.
Well, happy
Yeah.
anniversary.
Thank
That is
you.
wonderful.
Thank you. So that's kind of how I found this path, how I found healing. It was purely quote unquote accidental, right? As nothing actually is, but how it feels.
Yeah.
And it's taken me. I was shocked. I'm like, how did that work? I was working in marketing. I worked in animal hospitals for a long time, managing, doing HR, and I loved it. So I wasn't really looking for anything, but I'm nosy and I'm nerdy, and I wanted to understand how it worked. And so I learned about it and eventually started practicing. And now it's been 6 years that I've been able to now work with others. And now I get to be on the side of the conversation and look at someone and say, "You're not broken. I can help you."
Beautiful. What a beautiful journey. And to be able, I mean, it's really a gift to have been able to experience what it's like to be labeled with all of these titles that basically are saying you are broken in these different ways, but then to be able to also transform out of it. Because sometimes I feel like we get the labels, and once we've got the labels, we're just stuck with what those labels are. So when you're working with people, um, are they coming in and saying I'm broken? Do they have these anxieties and these depressions and stuff, or have they not necessarily been labeled with that?
Uh, it's a mix. Sometimes people come in and they actually say, "I'm broken. I need you to fix me." And my answer is always, "No one's broken. I don't need to fix anything. And yes, I can help you get to the place where you want to be and feel better." Some people have been diagnosed. A lot of times, I'm kind of the last. I'm the Hail Mary for a lot of
Yeah.
people, where they come to me and they're like, "Look, I've been doing this for years and I'm not getting anywhere, and I don't think there's any help for me. But someone mentioned you, and something about your story resonated with me, and something about your website clicked with me. And I thought I would just show up and be like, hey, can you help me?" And they all have the same experience that I had, where that big voice in their head is being like, "It's not going to help. You're beyond help." And so every time that they trust me with that journey, it's such an honor, and it's such a gift to be able to be part of it and help them heal and get out of it. So yeah, some people have for sure been diagnosed, and others just know that they feel broken, but I'm their first step. So it's sort of a balance in between.
Yeah, beautiful. Now, I know when we were chatting about you coming on here, we were talking about, should the topic be not being nice? Should the topic be not stepping into the shadows or
Right.
going into the shadows? Or should the topic be something about anger? And I'm trying to remember exactly how you had worded that. And then I was like, let's just do all three because they're so relevant to everything that everybody's experiencing right now. So I would love to hear more on your not being nice policy that you have.
Right, yes. And yeah, not being nice, boundaries, anger, they're all tied in together. So in my world, nice is being a doormat. Nice is putting everyone else's needs first. Nice is being that martyr and making sure that everyone else is taken care of. And if I have a little bit of energy left for me at the end of the day, great. If not, whatever. And a couple of years ago, I was at a training and we were talking about this idea, and we decided that NICE is actually an acronym that stands for Not in Compassionate Empathy.
Mm,
And we were talking about the difference between being nice and being compassionate, and how often we think it's the same thing, but it's not. And the best example I can give is back when I was working at animal hospitals. I was hired with a woman named Yvonne as reception, and so we started reception together. And things were going well, and then I advanced and I became office manager. And now I had to give her feedback about her performance. And we were friends, and I wanted to be nice. So, and while Yvonne was a wonderful, wonderful friend, she was not the best employee. So she just sit there and read her book all the time. And so my boss came to me. He's like, "You need to let her know she needs to, like, do something. I'm not going to pay her to read a book." But I didn't want to go up to her and say that. I didn't want her to be mad at me. I didn't want her to judge me. And so, not for her benefit, but for my own benefit, I was nice. And I was like, "Hey, maybe you should, do something. And she didn't really get the message. And so repeatedly, I was told to tell her, and I kind of did, but not really. And then one day, my boss came to me and he said, "Hey, she's not doing anything. You've talked to her, so I need you to go fire her." And I had to go fire my friend. And I realized that while it was very nice to not hurt her feelings, it wasn't compassionate. My fear of being disliked, my fear of not being approved of, let me lose her job for her. And so while I was being nice, I wasn't being compassionate. And that's kind of the crux of it, right? When we're being nice, we are not doing it for the other person. And so we're doing it so that they'll like us. And so being nice is kind of manipulative.
And I
And
love
we,
that.
right? And that kind of stings, that hurts, because that's certainly not the goal when we're being nice. No one goes out of their way. But that's how it comes across. And that's why when people are really nice to us, sometimes it feels kind of icky, like they're in our space.
Yeah. And actually, I will question someone who's being extremely nice. I'll be like, I don't necessarily trust you right now. And it's such a
Right?
weird kind of dynamic of that.
Yeah, because we know that they're being nice because they want our approval. It's kind of like, do you remember I'm going to date myself, the old Looney Tune cartoons? And they
Yes.
had that big bulldog who was like bouncing along, and then the little chihuahua who's like, "We're going to be great friends." And then the bulldog was like, "Bah," right? That's kind of what nice is. We're just pandering to someone, being like, "Please like me, please like me, please like me." And it's annoying to them, and it's kind of a manipulation, and it's a whole lot of boundary problems because I'm making myself responsible for someone else. And I always say to people, so if I'm in someone else's energy and I'm trying to figure out what do they like and what do they want to hear and what do they need, well, when I'm in their space, who's in my space? No one, right? We
Yeah.
abandon ourselves and then we wonder why we see and experience abandonment everywhere.
Yeah.
And so being nice is a fast path to feeling a lot of abandonment. And it also puts us into the cycle of passive aggressive. So when we're nice, everything's about the other person,
Yeah.
right? And so that's pure passive. And we'll do that for a while and then we'll get mad. How dare no one ever ask me about me? And then our little inner 2-year-old will throw a big temper tantrum and we'll be like, "You know what? F everyone." And we go over to the aggressive side where it's all about us and screw them, I'll do what I want. And then we feel guilty and we feel ashamed. And then that pushes us back to a passive state. And then we need anger to move us back to aggressive. And so we move back and forth. And when we're in the passive side, we think being aggressive is assertive, but it's not. Assertive is actually from a place of compassion. Nice is passive. And so learning how to be compassionate, but not always nice, is kind of what a lot of the coaching journey is when people come to work with me.
Beautiful. Can I just say, as you're saying that, I resonate with that so much because there's been so much work I've been doing over the past couple of years about honoring my own boundaries, understanding what my boundaries were. And I was totally that person who was, let me give everything until I'm depleted. And then I'm pissed off because no one has given anything back to me. And how dare they?
Right.
But it was never their responsibility. And that was a huge, like, oh my God kind of moment for me where I don't have to give them anything. And I also can just take things for myself, you know?
Right? Yeah, being receptive to things, right? We're always like, no one knows what I need. I'm like, well, did you ask? Do you know what you need? And everyone's like, oh, I don't know what I need. I'm like, exactly. So what we do is we show up in our relationships, whether it's a romantic relationship with a partner or with friendships or parents or whatever. We show up in the relationship and we say, hey, I have no idea what I need. You figure it out. And
Yeah.
then the other person's like, okay, well, is this what you need? And we're like, no. Is this what you need? No, you don't know me. And then we get all pissed off, right? That no one knows what we want. And then they'll be like, well, what do you want? We're like, well, if you don't know, I'm not going to tell you, which is fancy for, I have no idea what I want. You figure it out, right? And so we play this game and we wonder why our needs aren't getting met,
Yeah.
right? And that's really what a boundary is. We think boundaries are saying no and telling people how we feel. That's not a boundary. That is, so no can be a boundary, but no one wants to be that person who's just telling everyone no. That's kind of gets us more into the aggressive side. But in the assertive place in the middle, that place of balance, boundaries are about knowing what we need and asking for what we need in a way that is win-win, in a way that actually, when we do boundaries right, it cements a relationship. Right? If you set a boundary and all your relationships disappear, you probably put up a wall, not a boundary.
Yes.
And again, we get that mixed up all the time. Walls need to be guarded. You
Yeah.
can't just put up a wall and walk away. You need to then put up, like barbed wire, and you need guards, and those guards need guns. It takes a lot of energy to hold a wall, but boundaries are like bubbles. They float and they're flexible.
Yeah. I actually, this past year, I had an incident that came up that took me into that compassionate into aggressive kind of place, and, or sorry, nice into aggressive kind of place. And then the person who I had this experience with, about 3 days later, they came back to me and they were like, you need to do this for me now. And I was really kind of sitting in this place of, I'm done being nice, and I'm done holding this space for you to just kind of cause this chaos that you've been causing. And I didn't want to even reply to it. Saying no to them actually felt more scary to me than anything else. And so I sat with it for about 2 hours, and I was bouncing off my husband, like, do I say no? Do I say no? Do I say? And he was like, this is your choice. This is in your hands. What do you want? And I actually had to sit down and write out what I gave myself permission to say no to, or to have a boundary up against, on how the energy was being perceived. And it was the most valuable thing I've ever done for myself, to just write out, hey, Catherine, you have permission to say no here. You have
Yeah.
permission to have a boundary here. And I keep going back to that as things come up, but I actually feel more clear in having what those boundaries are. So I feel as though the message that you're saying right now is so important for so many people to hear,
Yeah.
because boundaries is not something that we're necessarily taught, especially as women. We're a lot of times told, just be nice, do
Yeah.
what you need to do and be nice, take care of them. And you take care of your husband, you take care of your kids, you take care of your friendships, you show up at work, you do your best. It's all about almost proving yourself to everybody
Yeah.
constantly.
Yeah, and it's exhausting. And, boundaries determine what is in our realm of control, what is not in our realm of control, what is belongs to us, what doesn't. And so boundaries are directly tied to our sense of self and our space and place in the universe. And when it comes to boundaries, the emotion that lets us know when a boundary is being infringed upon, when we're giving too much or not receiving enough, is anger. That's what anger's purpose is. Anger is meant to tell us, hey, pay attention. Something's going on with your boundaries. You're not managing your energy right. And so if I'm so busy being nice that I've turned off my anger, then I have turned off the alert system that lets me know where I am and where I am not. What is in my control, what is not in my control. I have turned off the sensor that lets me know about my space and place in the universe. And so anger is such an important emotion, and it's the first one we're taught to turn off because it's not nice, right? And it's not about getting your needs met. It's about being nice and polite and making sure everyone's happy and we can all sing kumbaya and hold hands and everyone's walking around smiling but seething under the surface, right? And you can feel it. I call it pissed mist. When you walk in the room, you're like, ooh, it's thick in here. It's like a fog, right? And what's interesting is in the branch of psychology that I operate under, the emotions are actually arranged in a hierarchy. And the top of the hierarchy is anger, followed by sadness, then fear, then hurt, then guilt. So it goes like, so anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt. So when I'm ignoring my anger, when I'm too busy being nice, over time that anger is called a gestalt, which is an organizational system, will get really heavy and weighed down, and it collapses down into sadness. And that's what we call depression. So depression is 100% of the time repressed anger.
Wow.
Now, if we're also not allowed to show our sadness because it's not nice and no one likes a Debbie Downer, just smile, right? If we ignore that too, it'll eventually collapse down into fear, and we call that anxiety. So I always like to say, if you are suffering from anxiety in your life, you're not anxious, you're pissed off. You just don't know what you need or how to get your needs met, right? And if we're really lucky, all of our gestalts are completely slammed shut, and all we give ourselves permission to feel is guilt or shame. And that's usually when people start to reach out to me, because that's when you're living in only shame, when anything that happens around you drops you down into this place of, I'm not good enough, there's something wrong with me, I'm broken. That's shame. And once we get into there, that's the dark night of the soul. That's where we're just spinning
Mm.
in chaos. And that's where I get to go in, reach out my hand and say, I got you, no problem. We can get out of this. Follow me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. And it's interesting that those five emotions, especially when there's so many people who are struggling right now with anxiety and depression, um, that those five emotions are the ones that we often have been taught to just stuff down, don't show it. Like anger's too scary or it's too big, and sadness makes us uncomfortable, and we need to be strong and show the strength. So, I,
Right.
and they're such human emotions. It's such a
Yeah. Well,
natural way of being.
Well, a healthy human being feels all their emotions. Your emotions are basically a very sophisticated biofeedback mechanism that allows your higher thinking self to communicate with your instinctual self. Because your instinctual self, or what psychology calls the unconscious mind, it's where memories are stored, it's where emotions are stored. It's very symbolic. It doesn't have language, it's the older parts of the brain, right? And so it can pick up on stuff like that, but it can't really process it and think about it. And then we have what I call our thinky self. And these two parts of our brain developed at different stages of our evolution. And they needed to find a way to communicate with each other. If your unconscious mind picks up that a mountain lion is behind you and is going to grab you out of your cave, like back in cave mama times, right? You need to be able to react before you have to think about it. And
Yeah.
so we develop this mechanism where we move energy, and that creates sensations in our body and biochemical shifts, and that's emotions. So our emotions are meant to tell us something. They are a feedback mechanism, right? And when we turn that off, we are basically turning off the feedback device that our soul has come up with to alert us to stuff. So yeah, every sadness lets us know there's been a loss.
Yeah.
It tells us that we need healing. But how many of us gift ourselves the gift of healing when we're sad? And how many of us instead berate ourselves for feeling sad and try to rationalize why we shouldn't feel sad and other people have it worse? Because nothing makes you feel better than shaming yourself into having an emotion. Right? And so we don't let ourselves feel, but every emotion is valid, every emotion is important, and every emotion has wrapped inside of it, there's always a gift in the pain.
Yes.
And then
Absolutely.
learning how to find that, wisdom inside, is what helps keep the energy moving so that we ourselves in our life don't feel like we're stuck.
Beautiful. So, how do you suggest for people to be with that pain rather than shame it or even start to berate themselves?
So I actually recommend something. I've called it the anger purge ritual, or anger work is what we just call it colloquially. And it's a 5 minute process. It's a dynamic meditation process. It's technically shadow work for all those who are interested in working with their shadow, which has become a big thing in 2020.
Yes.
Everyone's talking about shadow work now. I'm like, that's great, because I've always identified, most healers identify as light workers, but I always say I'm a shadow worker. I
Beautiful.
walk I walk the path of darkness so I can lead others out of it, right? And so anger work is a 5 minute process. You set a timer for 2 minutes, and then for 2 minutes, you have to do something physical to get that emotion out. Punch a pillow, scream into a pillow, strangle a cloth, slap, whatever you have to do. But it can't be your workout. You have to do this separate from your workouts.
Mm.
Because otherwise, if anger is the only fuel you use to work out, then either you're eventually going to run out of anger and lose your motivation to work out, or you're going to have to unconsciously keep creating anger in your lifetime to keep going to the gym.
Mm.
Both are icky. So I always say work out because you love it, work out because you want to challenge your body, but do anger work separately. So for 2 minutes, you do something physical. And if you're really good at being nice, you won't feel anger in this time. You'll feel numb, you'll feel stupid, you might feel nothing at all, you might feel guilty. Totally fine. So you do that for 2 minutes, then you reset your timer for 3 minutes, and you have to use a timer because time flows differently when you're with your emotions. Then you take journal, piece of paper, whatever, you put your pen on it, and then your goal is for 3 minutes to keep your pen moving, writing whatever comes up. It's called a stream of consciousness, and it doesn't have to be Shakespeare. It can be like, nothing's coming up. I don't know. Why did the lady on the thing tell me to do this? Banana. Why did I think of a banana? It doesn't matter. Literally just take all that garbage that boinks around in our head and put it into our journal. Because if we don't, it'll either stay bouncing around in our head or we have to find someone in our life to verbally vomit it on.
Yeah.
And if we're really nice, we don't want to do that. So we just hold on to it and it locks down. And that's what causes all those gestalts to lock together. So I recommend anger work. Now, because it is a form of shadow work, it is heavily resisted. Most of us need a little bit of a push to get it done.
Yeah.
And I will say in my Facebook group, we run challenges where we do 30 days in a row. And I've seen absolute miracles show up after 30 days in a row. There is a power in doing it cumulative.
Yeah.
And it can take sometimes up to 21 days for someone to even feel their anger if they're really good at being nice. Right. And so it takes some time to develop that relationship and to connect. It bridges the gap between your head and your heart.
Beautiful.
Right. So I really recommend that. And if anyone's interested, I do have all the instructions on my website as well as free downloads for worksheets to help them figure out how to do the process.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I will get the link to your website back up in the comments, just so everybody is able to connect with that if you are interested in learning how to do that 5-minute anger process. And I love that it's only 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's 5 minutes. It's so powerful. And let's be honest, in the middle of a pandemic, who doesn't feel like spending a few minutes beating the crap out of a pillow? Right? It's either the pillow or we beat up ourselves or we beat up the people in our lives. Pick the pillow. And just a little side note, don't use the pillow that you sleep on or that like guests sleep on just because that's icky. Use like a dedicated anger pillow.
Okay.
You don't want to like put all your rage into a pillow and then like give it to your partner and be like, here, go to sleep. I just feel like that's icky karma.
I absolutely agree. And it's not actually something I ever would have thought of before. So I think that's a really great point.
Right?
Now, talking more about the shadow, for some people who may not understand what a shadow is or what shadow work is, can you express to them just what it is that you believe shadow work is?
Absolutely. So the idea of shadow work was really coined and made famous by Carl Jung, who's a psychologist. But Freud talked about it as well. And basically it's talking about this idea of we have our conscious mind and we have our unconscious mind. So your conscious mind is, in psychology, anything you're aware of. So you're likely aware of the sound of my voice. You might be aware of the fabulous room behind me. And you might not be aware of the sensation of your feet on the floor or tucked up under you, wherever they are. But now that I mentioned it, you're probably noticing your feet. So, right? Everyone's like, oh, I noticed my feet. So where was that information a moment ago, right? The neurons are firing, your body's picking up the data, but it's out of your awareness because it doesn't matter. So anything that's in your awareness is your conscious mind. Everything else is your unconscious mind. Now, your unconscious mind does things for your body. So obviously it runs your immune system. It makes sure your heart keeps beating. You don't have to think to breathe. But your unconscious mind is also the place where we like to hide stuff from ourselves. So let's say you're going along in life and something big happens and you have a really big emotional response, like something traumatic happens, like a pandemic. And it's so overwhelming that if you hold on to all those big feelings, you'll just completely shut down. Now, our unconscious mind's number one job is to keep us safe, right? From an evolutionary perspective, we just need to make sure we don't die. So, winning. So, it can't let that happen. And so we have this mechanism where our unconscious mind will hide from us all these big feelings, all these big thoughts, all this stuff that's dragging us down so that we can function. So it's not always right here. But since it's important and we're supposed to come back to it at some point, it's like, okay, I'm going to put a pin in this. Let's get back to this later. And then the crisis is over. We make it through. Everything's good. And we don't go back for the pin because we'll say things like, oh, no, I'm fine. I just got over it. Right? I put it out of my mind and I'm always like, that's amazing. Where did it go? Did magic fairies come to take it? If you haven't actively done something to heal it, just because you're not aware of it doesn't mean it's not there. And so the shadow refers to the part of us where we hide all the stuff about ourselves that we don't like about ourselves. We also hide the stuff that we do like about ourselves. A lot of things in our shadow are things like, maybe I believe that I'm really smart and good at something, but all the people in my life tell me that I'm not, and I start to doubt myself, and so I will hide my knowledge of my worth in my shadow so that I don't have to stand up to the people around me and say, you're wrong. That keeps me being nice. And so our shadow is basically all our unhealed bits.
Yeah.
All our traumas, I call it, so when my husband and I moved into this house that we're in, anything that didn't fit anywhere else in the house, we shoved in the basement. We called it no man's land. Doesn't fit, shove it there. That's kind of your shadow. Right? I don't like it, stick it there. And then we pretend it's not there, but because these pins are supposed to be resolved and they're important, we have a backup mechanism where if something happens in the present moment that's somewhat similar to any of those pins that we put in the past, our unconscious mind will take all that information, throw it up to the surface, up to awareness, so we can resolve it, so we can heal it.
Yeah.
And so something small happens in the moment and we have this big emotional reaction and we call it a trigger.
Yeah.
And a trigger means the unconscious mind is functioning exactly as it should. It's supposed to do that. The problem isn't that we have triggers. The problem is that we have all these pins that we've never come back to. And we don't go back to them because, well, we didn't have the resources in the moment. I didn't want to deal with it then. Why would I want to deal with it now? And we don't know how to do it. And so that's where I come in. That's what I do. That's why I call myself a shadow worker. The tools I use pulls pins. And
Beautiful.
when those pins are gone, there's no triggers anymore.
Yeah. It's interesting because just the visual of that, I'm thinking of like a little voodoo doll or something, with all these little pins in it.
Yeah,
And really, we're all just walking around as these voodoo dolls that are so easily triggered by society, by social media, by this pandemic, everything. I noticed that with the pandemic, it's a lot of the old trauma responses are what's coming up to the surface. And a lot of people have no idea, myself included at times, on how to even move through what is this? It's lives are
right.
falling apart and we're trying to keep it all together with these pins and just stuffing more pins in where new pins are popping out.
Right? And we think that our job is to avoid all our triggers. We think that the path of healing means learning what our triggers are, why am I triggered, how can I avoid it, and then spending our lives I'm going to remove all the toxic people from my life, all the narcissists, because nowadays everyone's a narcissist.
Yep.
And, right? Everyone we don't like is a narcissist, and maybe, but probably not. And so we think that the path of healing is about recognizing where we're being taken advantage of and then putting up these walls and avoiding all the triggers. And while, yes, that is certainly better than being triggered all the time, if your world has become small because you can't go here because there's a trigger, you can't talk to that person because there's a trigger, if you have a list of things that you won't talk about or deal with, that's a really good indication that there's a lot of pins festering in the shadow that need to come up to the light. Because we have this mechanism, it doesn't matter if you avoid your triggers. Your unconscious mind needs to resolve these pins. It will throw it up to the surface as often as it can to get your attention. And so we either listen to it when it's a little knock at the door or we listen to it when it's a battering ram slamming it down. But thou shalt listen. Right? And so yeah, that's and right now with everything going on, if we think about anger and boundaries, we are all being told you can't go here, you can't go there, you can't do this. And so all of us are really angry. We don't know what to do with it. All of our coping mechanisms and things that we hid from, I'm going to hide from my emotions by doing yoga. I'm going to hide from my emotions by working all the time. I'm going to keep myself busy. And now we're all sitting here having to feel all the feels. And we're all like, I don't like it. I don't want to stop. And I get it because the feels are feely. And it's also a really good opportunity to start to clear out all those pins so that you can start to walk forward on your path without it being a constant, endless stream of trigger management.
Yeah.
Because that's what the traditional system teaches us. Let's identify the triggers and let's give you some coping mechanisms. And it works, but it's exhausting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And just I feel as though if just identifying the trigger, so I understand that this is my childhood wound from this experience. That's not healing it.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Like that inner child has so much that they need to just be able to express and to feel and to say maybe out loud or be supported or feel supported in whatever that emotion is. And that's the work that I believe we all need to do is just healing that little child that's feeling so hurt or abandoned or unheard or unloved or unvalidated in what their experience is. But my experience in kind of watching the world and stuff has been watching people just go, oh, I'm triggered. and I'm deleting you as a friend. I'm cutting you out of my life. I'm turning off my Facebook completely now because there's too much that's happening, you know?
Right, yeah, people who are like, I have to take a break from Facebook. If you have to take a break from Facebook, then you probably have sucky boundaries at other places in your life. And you probably have a whole lot of pins that need to come out of the shadow to be healed. Right? In an ideal world, you can talk to anyone, anywhere, anytime, and you can still get your needs met. You can still feel heard because that doesn't come from the other person's response. And that's kind of the thing when it comes to boundaries. If I set a boundary with someone with the hope that they will change their behavior, that's manipulation.
Yeah.
If I set a boundary so that I can hear myself, stand up for myself, that is how I live my worthiness, which means I must first know that I am worthy of speaking up. And speaking my truth doesn't mean, in the spiritual world, speaking my truth means yapping at everyone about how I feel and yelling at them when they don't agree with me. I'm telling you how I feel, I'm speaking my truth. Yeah. And if everyone's running, like I had one of the ladies in my healing circle, she's like, I spoke my truth and someone called me a bitch. I'm like, well, then probably you weren't setting a boundary, you were putting up a massive wall. Because when we speak our truth from a place of compassion, not from passive, not from aggressive, but from assertive compassion, then it's the glue that holds relationships together. It really is. And right now we have such an opportunity with all the noise outside of us quieting down. All our pins are just right under the surface being like, heal me, heal me. And that's why it feels so feely right now. But it's such a wonderful opportunity because we can either use this time to wait for things to go back to normal, or we can use this time to heal so we can emerge back into the world healed.
Mm.
And I
Yes.
personally think that's a much better option.
Yes.
Certainly more fun.
Absolutely. Now, what do you suggest for people who might be feeling triggered by what's happening in the world or what's happening on their Facebook with their family, whatever might be coming up? Um, how would you lead someone to identify first the trigger within them rather than seeing the problem outside of them, and then kind of moving through that trigger process and healing it? So I guess pulling the pin out.
Pulling the pin out. So, a couple different ways. So, one, obviously, this is what the focus of my one on one work is. So, if someone has a lot of heavy trauma and a lot of pins and they are just suffering and they're at the end of their rope and they don't know what else to do, I say, come work with me one on one. We'll pull all the pins. I work with them coaching wise to get them to a place where they know how to speak their truth in a way that is empowering for them and inspiring and empowering for the other person. In an ideal world, your boundary inspires the other person, not pisses them off.
Mm.
Now, for someone who's not quite there yet or not quite sure what to make of me yet, and they still want a bit more information, this is kind of the reason why I run my Rewrite Your Story course. And I'm running it again February 6th and 7th of the new year. It's going to be on live, but via Zoom. And we talk about what is your story. We start to dismantle that story, which the story is based on all those pins. We talk about how that came to be, not why. Because why is, we think that if I just understand why I feel this way, that will magically fix everything. But why is, it's a conscious mind question. It satisfies curiosity. But you could know all the reasons why and still don't know how to fix it. Or we can forget about the why. I always joke, I'm like, if it's not one thing, it's your mother. Blame her. There we go. Problem solved. Let's move on. Right? Let's learn how to heal.
Yes.
Right? Forget about the why. It doesn't matter. I always joke that asking why is mental masturbation. Feels good, gets you nowhere. So, right? It makes us feel like we're doing something, but it's not. And so in this course, we kind of work through what is the purpose of all the emotions? How can we start to tune into them? And then I walk you through how to set boundaries in an empowering way. And I teach the magic formula for boundaries, the magic sentence to use with the toxic people in your life. So, how to start feeling and being heard in a way that empowers you and inspires and empowers the other person. How to live from a place of compassion. So, those are the two options that I offer for anyone who's wanting to take that next step.
Beautiful, beautiful. And is that available on the website then if people want more information on that as well?
Yep, under events, you'll see Rewrite Your Story. I have my online course if you prefer more of videos and self-paced, or I have my live one if you prefer to actually have interactive and ask me questions.
Beautiful, Beautiful, beautiful. So I know as well, just in reading the bio and stuff, you also offer retreats.
Yes.
Awesome. So can you tell us a little bit about that and what does that look like? And are you doing online retreats right now, or what does that look like even?
Right? So, pre COVID, when the world was spinning in the correct direction, I was running chakra retreats every twice a year. So, I have a spring chakra retreat and a fall one. They take place in Hockley Valley, so in Orangeville area, and it's a full weekend. All the meals are included. The property is magical. There's like this stream that runs through the whole place. It's absolutely fabulous there. We talk about different energy stuff, different manifestation techniques. We do a fire release ceremony. We learn about the chakras and then do different activities to open up all the chakras. And
Beautiful.
so each season has different themes, different elements. So the plan was that this last fall was supposed to be the element of air, and then spring was supposed to be the element of water. We'll rejig. Basically, I go by what I'm guided by, but it's a full weekend of healing, and everything's included. I have healing practitioners come on site as well, so in downtime, you can get a Reiki session. I have had tea leaf readers come, mediums. So basically, you leave all warm and gooey.
Awesome.
So I currently have May 29th to 31st scheduled and booked. I have a lot of people who are registered because once the world starts spinning in the right direction, it's going to fill up fast. So a lot of people have already registered, so they have their spot. And once we're able to run it, great. But until that time, I just keep kind of advancing people their registration. So if spring gets canceled again because of COVID, we'll move to November, and people have 2 years to use it once they've paid their spot.
Excellent.
For online, I was going to do an online retreat, and the response was, so instead, what ended up happening is this is how I created my weekly virtual healing circles.
Oh, beautiful.
And these are things I run. I run them every Thursday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time via Zoom. Every week we talk about a different topic, followed by guided meditation, breath work, and gratitude practice. And these are free.
Oh, awesome.
They are open to anyone who wants to join. We are, just because we can't be physically close to each other doesn't mean we can't connect emotionally, mentally, and energetically. So distance doesn't have to mean disconnection. So right now, my healing circle is what is filling in for what would have been retreats. And for those of you who want to kind of catch up on the topics, the healing circle, we record it live, and that becomes my podcast, which is called Bridging the Spiritual Gap. And that's on iTunes and on Spotify for anyone who wants to kind of explore what I talk about that way as well.
Beautiful. I love how easily you've adapted to all of these changes and stuff that have happened this year. Because I think that's what a lot of people have had to do, is adapt in some way. But it feels like you just kind of flow with, okay, universe, what next?
Basically, my job is just to follow the breadcrumbs that the universe shows, like puts in my path. And so at the beginning, I had no intention of doing any kind of a healing circle virtually. It just kind of happened. And then for the first 20 healing circles, I was recording all this information. Everyone's like, wow, this is so good. I missed some stuff. And so that then became packaged and is now my online course called Bridging the Spiritual Gap, which is 5.5 hours of content that just talks about everything from setting up an altar to high energetic meditation rituals. And so that kind of happened. And then once the course was done, I'm like, well, I want to keep doing the healing circles. Now there's still all this good topics. So what am I going to do? I'm like, let's do a podcast. And so, yeah, the universe is just like, this is where you're going. I'm like, all right, I'm not, wherever you need me,
Yeah,
that's where I will go.
beautiful. That's wonderful. And just coming back to the shadow work and the niceties and all of this, what would you say is the most relevant or prominent thing a person should do? Should they feel like they are that person who's just being too nice? What would be the first step to kind of step out of that and into a new role of actually having boundaries?
The first step is to know what you want and what you need, because that's all a boundary is. Boundaries are saying to someone, hey, I appreciate that you're upset, and I would love for us to be able to talk about this together. Versus what we think a boundary is, which is, you're upset, but you can't talk to me like that. And I'm like, well, they can. It is perfectly within their right. People are allowed to be jerks. They're allowed to be assholes. That is not in my realm of control. But what is in my realm of control is my wants and needs. So, yes, they can be a jerk. And I can also step up and say, hey, I appreciate that you're in a jerky mood, and I would love for us to be able to talk about this when you calm down.
Mm.
So the first step of boundaries is figuring out, what do I want? What do I need? And that's where my coaching tends to come in, because most people have no idea. We know what we don't want. We know what other people need. Oh, we're so good at solving other people's problems. Those are easy. But our own, right? It's the reason why I have my own coach. My life, by very definition, is my blind spot, because I don't have any perspective on my life. I'm in it.
Mm.
Right? And so when it comes to knowing what my wants and my needs are, oftentimes I need someone outside of myself to help lead me through it, to help me figure out, well, what do you need? And ask me the right questions to guide me, because chances are I was never taught how to access that. We'll just sit there and be like, I don't know what I need. I don't know what I need. And that's kind of where it ends.
Yeah.
So working with someone to figure out, well, what do you need? How can we word this? How, or how are you, what things are you doing every day to light up your soul? Right? This is a boundary with self. We talk about self-care all the time, but no one knows what self-care is. We think self-care is getting mani-pedis, going for a massage, and maybe, but at the end of the day, self-care is a boundary we set with ourself, and it's about doing things that light up our soul,
Yes.
which again comes back to this idea of, well, what lights up my soul? What do I want? What do I need? Who am I? And in order to know who I am, I have to go in here. And this is also where I hide all the crap I don't want to deal with. That's why shadow work.
Yes.
Your wants and needs and desires are hidden underneath all the shadow garbage that you don't want to deal with. So sometimes it's right up to the surface, and so people can do it on their own and kind of figure it out. A lot of times, especially with people I work with, what they want, what they need is buried under years and years and years of trauma, of negative self talk, of putting everyone else first. And so it's so far down they can't find it. And so I get to come in and be like, no problem, I got the map, follow me. Like the tour guide, I'm going to put on my umbrella, let's go. Right? And so yeah, learning what you need, what you want is the first step always of boundaries. And if knowing what you want is a total like blank, or worse, terrifying to you, then it's probably a sign that some shadow work is needed.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And I love that you also work with a coach, that you also recognize that, hey, I don't have all of the answers for myself, because I feel like it's so much easier for us to see other people and see them in their true potential, but also see maybe where they might be holding themselves back or whatnot. And so to be able to have someone to help guide you in that same way is it's putting the work right to the test, really.
It's necessary. I always say to people, you don't have to work with me as your coach, but if you're going to find a coach, please find a coach who has a coach.
Yeah.
Like, it's mind boggling to me how many people are coaches, but they themselves don't have a coach, right? I get up the crazy tree. I will call my coach. When I'm talking to my coach, I am not in coach mode. I am in pure victim, sob story, help me mode. And I need someone to coach me out of that because I'm in it. So I don't have enough perspective to get myself out of it.
Yeah.
The best I can do is shove it down. Big pin. Right? Effective
Yeah.
for the short term. So yeah, my coach is always my first call. Where else in our life do we have someone whose only purpose is to hold the highest potential of our soul's evolution and growth? Our partners, we'd like to think that, but no, they've got their own stuff. Our friends, our family, they've got their own stuff. But our coach is someone who, no matter what, they have our back.
Yeah.
And they always have that perspective, and their entire purpose is our empowerment. That's an amazing thing to have in our life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting because as you say that, I'm thinking, if there was a surgeon who needed surgery, he would not rely on himself.
Right. Hack it off, it's fine, right?
There's a time when you get to be that person that is the one who's receiving the healing, and a time when you get to perform at the top of your game. So
Yeah, and what makes a healer, we all think that a healer is someone who gives to other people, but a healer is someone who heals themselves and who can see not where you are, but where you could be. If all I see, when I look at my clients, if all I see is where they are, then the best they could ever get is where they are, because that's the space I'm holding for them.
Yeah.
I need to hold space for their evolution. And who else in our life holds that space for us and says, yeah, you got it. It's fine. It's okay. You fell down. It's good. Come on. You got it. Let's go. We got this. Right? Who else does that for us? And so, yeah, it's extremely important. Whoever you choose to work with, if you are struggling, work with whatever coach you want, but please work with a coach who has a coach. Please.
Good words of advice. Now, one question that I ask everybody who comes on the In the Spotlight is, if you could share one piece of wisdom with the world right now, anything that you think the world absolutely needs to know, what would you want the world to know?
I would want the world to know about the Japanese art of kintsukuroi.
You're going to have to explain.
So kintsukuroi is the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with molten gold. So in our society, when something breaks, we're like, it's broken, it's worthless, get rid of it, replace it. So what we'll try to do is we'll try to put it back together and pretend nothing happens, or we'll discard it. But in Japan, they're smart, and they would see these broken pieces of pottery, and they wouldn't try to glue it back together so that you could pretend nothing happened. They would put it back together with molten gold, in essence highlighting the scars, because they believed each piece is more beautiful for having broken and healed. And what's really cool is where these pieces are put back together, they're stronger than they were before. And so you can't pretend that nothing happened. They're no longer whole. They're certainly not broken. They are unbroken, which means stronger than before. And I think that that is a message that the world needs right now, that it's not about going back to whatever the normal was. It's not about pretending that this year didn't happen. This is a part of our life. It's a part of our history. It is a beautiful scar to be highlighted because it makes our journeys unique.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And actually, now that you say that, I did read a book years ago. It was a fictional book, but it was about a Japanese woman who moved in with a Jewish woman. And the Jewish woman had a bunch of broken dishes from her great grandmother who had survived the Holocaust. And the Japanese woman had taught her how to put the pieces back together from the dishes, but they didn't even create the dishes back into wholeness. They created a new art mural on their wall, and it was a very healing story for both of them. So that just flashed back in my mind as you talked about that.
Yeah,
It's
let's
a
put it.
beautiful art form.
It is. Put it back together more beautiful than before, more unique than before. Anyone can have a dish. Dishes are a dime a dozen, but every dish that has broken and been repaired in this way is completely unique. And so, and that's kind of where Unbroken came from. That's the background of Live Life Unbroken. It's not about coming back to wholeness or fixing me. It's about becoming unbroken, which means stronger than before. We're going to highlight the scars and admire the beauty of them and create something completely brand new and artistic and lovely to look at, right? As opposed to a constant reminder of my pain. That's no fun. It's a valid option, but it's icky.
Absolutely. This has been absolutely such a delight, Jennifer. Thank you so much for joining us. If anybody is wanting to connect with Jennifer, you can reach out to her at her website at www.livelifeunbroken.com. As she said, she is holding the Rewrite Your Story workshop February 6th to 7th of 2021, and that's going to be an online event, so we don't have to worry about what restrictions we're under. I believe you said you also have that course available as a self-paced course.
Yep, the Rewrite Your Story is also a self-paced course. I also have my Bridging the Spiritual Gap, which is an intuitive development course for anyone more interested in the energy side of things. I have my Bridging the Spiritual Gap podcast. And then for anyone who's interested in kind of the one-on-one side of things, I do offer a 1-hour complimentary meet and greet via Zoom. So we can chat for an hour and they can see who I am. I can learn more about them and see if it's a good fit.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight, Jen. Thank you everyone for joining us as well. Because we are doing this right before Christmas, happy holidays to everybody who's watching. And I hope you and your family and whoever it is that you're able to connect with over this holiday season all have a absolutely tremendous holiday season, even though it's different than what we've known it to be, but to just make the best of what that is. As always, if you need extra support during the holiday season, feel free to reach out to myself. I'll be back here next Tuesday night at 8 o'clock, and we're going to be talking about letting go, but also allowing ourselves to receive as our final output for the 2020 year. And there will be a special video coming out next week as well with all of the words of wisdom from all of our speakers over the past year. So thank you, everybody. Have a great night. And thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me.